Welcome to Uplink. The aviation dialogue starts here. I'm Shasta Ways.
And I'm Michael Wiles.
Thank you for joining us. Our guest on Uplink today is Michael Camal, the Senior Advisor at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Camal is a graduate of the University of Rhode Island, where he earned a degree in sociology and a minor in leadership studies. At the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Michael works on the Blue Campaign, Blue Initiative, which is focused on ending human trafficking. Michael Camal, welcome to the Uplink podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for making the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Michael, you are a senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And in preparation of this interview, Michael Wiles and I, we've been just reading a lot about you. And there's a very powerful article out there about how you got into your line of work. So if you can just start off this interview by just talking to us about how you got into your field and what was the inspiration behind it.
Sure thing. Well, just a little background about me. I'm from New Jersey. This started when I went to school at the University of Rhode Island. And I actually started out with a federal internship with the Department of Homeland Security, specifically within our biometrics office. But at the end of my internship, there was an opportunity to join what's called the Blue Campaign. And the Blue Campaign is the department's national public awareness campaign to combat human trafficking. And so it was through that internship that I got this current job where I specifically focus on the aviation industry, raising awareness.
That's very cool. Did you have any interest in aviation before you got into this position, or did it come after?
Not particularly, no. I actually didn't even know that aviation would be such a big focus with human trafficking awareness until I started. But once I started, I learned just how big of an impact the industry can have.
So tell us about the Blue Light Initiative and how does it help aviation personnel to spot, human trafficking victims, and, how has the program evolved under your leadership?
Great question. So I mentioned I work at the Blue Campaign, but what's within the Blue Campaign is Blue Lightning, and that is our specific initiative to raise awareness of human trafficking in the aviation industry. And basically what we do is we train airport and airline staff on what the indicators of human trafficking are and how to report suspicions to federal law enforcement. And so I think one part of your question was, how has the program grown? When I first started 5 years ago on Blue Lightning, the specific focus was just on commercial airlines. So just on flight attendants, just on pilots. And what we found out when we got there was that it's not just the pilots that can make a difference in the fight against human trafficking. It's also all of those other employees that are a part of the aviation enterprise. You've got general aviation employees. You've got airport workers, folks at large airports, small airports, fixed base operators. So we basically expanded the program not only by adding additional airlines, but also by adding a significant number of airports, associations, training institutes, and also university aviation departments. So we expanded the partnerships and also the number of people that are trained and who is trained as well.
Michael, I have to say you guys are doing a great job, because I've recently have visited the Newark airport as well as Orlando and Houston. And I want to say, when I visited the bathrooms, there was a sign, and every so often you would hear a message, if you see something, say something. So you guys, the awareness is out there and I'm seeing it. So I commend you guys on you starting up this initiative.
Well, thank you. It's funny you say that, because whenever I talk about this, I tell people, I've never been so excited to go and travel to all these different airports and check out their bathrooms.
Yeah.
And Houston was one of the first airports was actually the first airport to sign on to our program. And they went full throttle. You go into every single bathroom, you're going to see it. You're going to see our signs up there. And, New Jersey was a priority of mine, just being from New Jersey. So all those airports are participating, Orlando as well. And, the other airports are starting to do the same thing.
So I want to talk about that. I was reading a statistic where there are 313,000 victims of human trafficking in Texas. And a majority of that number, unfortunately, is minorities and the youth. And that number, it just scares me so much because I have a little boy. I'm curious to know, I see it, I hear about it a lot living in Texas. But how has the airlines and the aviation industry responded to the training and the resources that the Blue Lighting Initiative is providing? What's been the response?
So whenever you first start an initiative like this to combat human trafficking, there tends to be, from the private sector, a little bit of resistance at first, because they think of human trafficking. They think, well, that's such a terrible crime that can't happen on my airline, in my airport. But what we found is that the victims, they don't always look like what we think of as a victim. They could look like an average traveler traveling through the airport. And so we got a couple big partners like Houston, like San Antonio, like Newark and New Jersey airports, who took the training. It resonated with them, and they advocated on behalf of us to their airport partners. And that's when we really started to see a big uptick in partnerships. It wasn't necessarily, I was doing outreach too, but there's only so much outreach I can do as the federal government. When the colleagues are telling colleagues that this is an important issue that we should be focusing on, that's when we see a difference being made. So there's a very positive response among the airport community to this topic. And, like you said, Texas has a ton of cases, but Texas also is doing a ton to combat the crime. They're doing stuff that helps them identify that the cases are even there. Crime is happening in every single state. And we just had a newsletter come out, our DHS Center for Countering Human Trafficking, where our office is a part of. We supported a case in Nebraska, Omaha, where a 25-year-old man was sentenced to 45 years in prison for sex trafficking. He picked up 2 minors from a foster care building and brought them to a hotel, and had his friend take pictures of them, sexually exploited one of them. And the quote that he said was that he was breaking her in for other people.
Wow.
And that's one person. There are tons of people out there like that. So it's important that everyone is aware, because you never know where this might happen.
Yeah. Wow, that's devastating, but kudos to you and your team for the work they're doing. You talk about the airline industry and the airport industry, but we know that aviation is much broader. There's general aviation and there's business aviation. First of all, how has that side of the community responded? How are you getting the message to them? And then what should aviation professionals watch out for in these situations, since you said it's not what we think it usually looks like?
The private aviation and general aviation industry has responded well to our message. They've been doing the training. The public awareness, not as much as the airports, because they serve a different clientele, so they don't necessarily want that stuff out there. But we're starting to change that narrative to basically say that being anti-human trafficking vocally is a good thing for business, because you want customers that are not going to be doing that kind of stuff. So they've been taking the training. There are certain indicators that you can look out for. Generally, a lot of the indicators translate from commercial to general. Things like people not having control of their documents or passports, or things like someone doesn't know where they're going when they get to the airport, especially if they're in a regional airport. They should know where they're going. Non-genuine relationships, someone trying to pose as another person's parent or guardian. These are things that folks need to look out for. Everyone knows about the Jeffrey Epstein case. That's a big one. But there are other people out there who fly private aviation. Just think about the one thing I would highlight is that any minor under the age of 18 engaged in commercial sex is a victim of human trafficking. So if there's any talk of that, and you see a bunch of young people, men, boys or girls, going onto a plane, and there's talk of that, that's something that should be reported immediately, because there's no question about it.
For sure. I'm just trying to consume all of this. And I'm just curious, Michael, how do you cope with these really strong stories and numbers, that you see day in and day out about sex trafficking, of, human trafficking? Is it hard for you, or do you at some point become a little numb to the stories that you hear?
I never become numb to the stories. They're always very impactful. No matter how long I work on this stuff, I will never it will never still be a shock to me for some of these things that are happening. But what helps is seeing the success stories and working with the survivors who have been through that trauma, but have come out on the other end. And they basically show other survivors that there's a way out, that they don't just need to live in that life forever, that they can get out of that situation. And so seeing the success stories and seeing the work that me and my team that we do lead to success stories makes it all worth it and makes me want to continue to do it, and then also to encourage other people to want to do it as well.
You shared the story of what happened in Nebraska. Are there any other stories that you could share that show the success of the initiative so far?
There are actually a number of success stories that we've had. And then there's also some stories that we had that are learning lessons that are, we identified this, but there were so many indicators that we could have spotted to get it earlier. One success story I'll talk about is from our Homeland Security investigations, our HSI office in Birmingham, Alabama. They did a big outreach effort in advance of the World Games. Human trafficking happens year-round, every day, but at major sporting events, there's an opportunity to raise awareness. Not necessarily that the crime is happening more there, but there's an opportunity to raise awareness. So they did a big training. They trained all the volunteers. I personally worked to ship with the local agent there to ship thousands of our Blue Campaign awareness materials. They trained those staff, and then they did a big human trafficking operation, law enforcement, and they got calls. They had a special number set up. They got calls, and one of the volunteers who took the training, who had our lanyard card on her, made a call, and that call resulted in identifying a victim. I believe it might have been actually a couple victims. So that's just a prime example. It shows that awareness works. Had that volunteer not been trained, who knows if she would have known what she was looking at? Who knows if she knew who to call, or who knows if she would have hesitated to do it? Because we don't know. Sometimes we're a little hesitant to contact law enforcement. So that's a prime success story. And then there's some others I can talk about with the aviation connection, but I just think it's so important for people to be aware.
Michael, I'm curious, supporting survivors of human trafficking is so critical and crucial. I can imagine how sensitive the whole experience may be, stepping up and saying something. How does the Blue Campaign ensure that these victims get the help that they need throughout the process? And what challenges do you face in improving the comprehensive support?
So Blue Campaign is a part of Homeland Security Investigations, our DHS Center for Countering Human Trafficking. And within HSI is our Victim Assistance Specialist program. So those are folks that are out there in the field with agents, with federal agents, and their sole job is to make sure that victims are connected to resources and that they're aware of their legal rights. So that once an agent identifies a trafficker and a victim, that victim assistance specialist is there to, one, establish that rapport, make sure that the victim has access to their basic needs. It's all about the victim-centered approach. When they encounter a victim, it's not going to be, we're going to question you about your trafficker. It's, when was the last time you had something to eat? Let me get you some water, whatever you need, housing, And then, they establish that rapport. They make sure they're connected to non-governmental organizations, because Homeland Security is not going to be able to do everything. We can't do all of it, but we can work with our partners to make sure that victims have access to the resources that they need while their case is ongoing. And if that victim chooses, they can participate in the case and help put their trafficker away for life or longer. And the challenge, I would say, that I've been hearing from all of our victim assistance specialists is victims have a very big fear of law enforcement. They have a fear of authority. So it's very hard to establish that trust. Oftentimes, both labor trafficking and sex trafficking, the victims, they get sucked back into their trafficking situation. So it's about establishing that rapport, making sure, putting the victim's needs first, and then worrying about the rest after. And when agencies use the victim-centered approach, they see a ton more success rates with prosecutions and with victims getting out of their situation for good.
So it seems like on the home front, there's been much success with getting the national aviation community to sign on board with the national airlines. I am curious, we know that international travel has come back online in a much bigger way since COVID restrictions have been relaxed, over the last year. And this is setting up to be another busy summer. What is the relationship like with foreign carriers as they're coming into the country and leaving? How are they being onboarded to participate in the initiative?
I've been working for a while to make sure that this program is accessible to foreign airlines and foreign airports. We don't want to come in and tell these countries like how to run their country, but we can provide recommendations and we can offer resources, free resources that they can take advantage of if they want to. The reporting options are a little bit different when you're in a foreign country. If there's no connection to the U.S., you have to go to that foreign country's law enforcement. So we understand that, and we made a version of our training video that's available to foreign airlines. So we can partner with foreign airlines. We could partner with foreign airports. We had a foreign airline roundtable last January where we invited them to come in person to DC to hear about this. We partnered with an airline in Norway, Norse Atlantic Airways. They're fairly new. And then we also are doing some training. So July 30th is World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. This is not a new thing. A lot of the foreign airlines are participating, but we just want to enhance that and use the success that we've had in the US to expand it wherever it makes sense globally.
Michael, I'd love to hear, you talked a little bit about the roundtable discussion that was hosted by the Department of Homeland Security. Can you give us a glimpse into that roundtable? What were some big topics and if anything came out of it?
Yes, the roundtable we hosted was, it was for Secretary Mayorkas. There's a couple of different reasons why we had that roundtable. One, it was to show the industry that the Secretary prioritizes human trafficking awareness among all of the Homeland Security issues. And why it's important to invite senior leaders is because that's how you actually get change. If you don't go to the senior leaders, sometimes change doesn't happen. Sometimes the airlines, probably, as you guys know, a lot of airlines, maybe they don't want to add new trainings to their curriculum. It's not that they don't want to raise awareness about human trafficking, but that costs money. They have to teach people. They have to take time out of their day to teach people. But when we brought them to the roundtable, we basically provided them an update on what human trafficking looks like in aviation, what progress we've made with the Blue Lightning Initiative program, as well as an update on the training. So we ended up updating the training so it's not just applicable to the in-flight staff, but also the ground staff. And then the third part of that was to basically get feedback from the industry on what we can be doing better, how can we better work together, data sharing, that sort of thing, and just field questions. So that was just the start of it, and it was really helpful because when you have conversations at that high level, that's where change happens. And so we saw a lot of participation from all of the airlines. It was a very successful event.
That's awesome. Do you see future roundtables?
I do, and I see specific reasons for the roundtables. Like in last January, it was the Foreign Airline Roundtable to encourage the foreign airlines to participate. We're working with Kyle and AAAE on doing an airport roundtable to see what the future of that looks like so that maybe we can get, you see some posters in Houston, maybe we can get all the airports to align on the same core messaging so you don't see different types of stuff or imagery that might not be on mark with what human trafficking awareness should be here in the United States. So the roundtables are a real good tool, getting the right people in the room to talk about the solution, but also to hear about what the problem is. Because if some senior leaders don't even, they might not even know what human trafficking is. They might think it's the same thing as smuggling. And when they hear the stories, they hear the reality from government officials, it really does help.
How has technology played a role in improving the process or the initiative? Is there a role for technology here, or is it just awareness through the teachings that are happening?
Technology is extremely important. Technology and specifically data collection capabilities of non-governmental organizations. Data is a scarce thing with human trafficking. The data that we do have is limited because it's a hidden crime. So a lot of this crime happens under the radar. People, the data that we have is basically on the cases that we know about. When someone calls in a tip or reports that they're a victim, the first question is going to be, how can we get you help? Not, were you flying on airlines? What states were you going to? There's different priorities that you have in place. So technology and finding ways to get accurate data that helps us tailor our anti-trafficking efforts is I think very, very valuable. And there are some universities that are doing some good work.
Michael, I'd love to hear what sort of career opportunities are available within Homeland Security, specifically for the Blue Light Initiative. Is there growth here? And if you were to be in front of a group of young people, I guess what would be your pitch to get them excited and motivated to join you and your team?
Well, it's funny because DHS, our Homeland Security office, is always hiring. There are a ton of careers in Homeland Security. And in aviation in Homeland Security that you can be a part of. And my pitch would just be to think about the mission. What drives me to continue to do what I do is being a part of a mission that makes a real impact on real people. And the Department of Homeland Security is full of missions that make real impacts on real people and real things. So, our DHS Center for Countering Human Trafficking is growing. It's a pretty new agency in terms of we were codified last year, just got funding. So there's going to be some positions opening. I would say to get a USA Jobs account, apply like crazy, get your resume out there and, start interviewing.
And is there anything specific, any skill set one should learn before joining the Department of Homeland Security? Anything that you would say that would make you stand out or help you if you were looking for a career in this field?
Homeland Security, well, with human trafficking specifically, you can get experience volunteering for nonprofits. With Homeland, what I'm looking for specifically is someone who has a positive attitude, who's willing to get the job done, even if the job is not fun. Not all elements of the job are fun. In the federal government, there's some red tape we always have to cut through, but young people have the power to make a real difference in government. They have different mindsets. They have different ways of doing things. And they can get things done faster than I think people who have probably been here for a long time have by bringing that mindset. So I look for a good attitude, not necessarily any specific major or anything like that, but just a passion for the mission, a good attitude, and a willingness to try new things.
Mike, we did an episode a few months ago talking about how we could get more young people into the policy side and regulation side, and Shasta and I were almost hopeless because we didn't see people who were in the role. And to come across you and the work that you're doing and the energy that you have for the work is so refreshing and so inspiring. We really hope that you will continue to do the important work, because what you're doing is not just paper pushing. These are things that are very impactful. So I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. And I really hope that it will leave a positive impact on not just the aviation industry, but the rest of travel and communities all around the country.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, and just echoing Michael, in our discussion, we talked about how can we get more talent to go work these government jobs, because that's where, everything starts, is that leadership. And you nailed it in terms of it's the purpose, the mission that you guys have. It's so powerful, and that's what's going to get people excited and motivated to work in these positions. So the fact that you're so young and passionate, I think you're an inspiration for people to look up to and kind of follow your footsteps. So keep the great work going.
Thanks. That's very kind.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure Michael has as well. Thank you for all of the perspective, the information, the stories that you provided today. I'm excited for people to hear this conversation and learn more.
Thank you.
Wow, Michael, what a conversation. What an incredible guest. Thank you again, Michael Camal, for joining us. What did you think?
Oh man, it was so impressive. And to see a millennial being in such a leadership role in the government, take on such a big initiative, I was really inspired to hear and see Michael move in this space, because we need, sort of like that vibrancy to sort of move some of these big initiatives.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's so refreshing to see someone so young, diverse, full of passion, bring that to work on the government sector. So it was just great to see that energy, that hard work, that initiative from Michael. And man, I just learned so much about human trafficking, and it's really opened my eyes, this conversation for sure.
Absolutely. And now I I'm appreciating the problem even more and how tricky it is, especially as someone who works in private aviation, where there is sort of the benefit, the appeal of private aviation is privacy, is to not to pry with travelers where they're going, is not to really question people. So some of the inconveniences, for lack of a better word, that you would experience in commercial aviation, such as going through TSA or the boarding process and verifying tickets, in a sense, doesn't happen in private aviation. And so now I really appreciate what the Blue Lightning Initiative is trying to accomplish, because I see just how tricky it could be in private aviation. And I think it also opens the door for more discussions about what needs to be done to ensure that this is like fully stamped out. I'm thinking about how are companies, private aviation companies, training their members, how are FBOs training their members, what sort of enhanced security measures should exist. Because today when you go to a FBO, unless it is at like a major airport where there's like a mini TSA screening area, for the most part there is no enhanced screening measure. You maybe look at the passport or the driver's license for someone, but you don't really see those things in private aviation. So I don't know, what do you think?
So it's interesting you say that. I don't want to open a can of worms for the purposes of this conversation, but when I think of Jeffrey Epstein, how is he able to get all those girls onto those islands? And, I feel like, I don't want to speculate, but probably business aviation had something to do with that. But not to get down that rabbit hole. What's kind of positive is that I know business aviation is talking about human trafficking. So NATA came out with an article written by Molly McMillan. And the article was titled "Business Aviation Must Stay Alert for Signs of Human Trafficking." And what this article provided was just some insights in terms of who are these victims. And they shared that for every 10 victims detected globally, 5 are adult women and 2 are girls. So, women are obviously being more targeted than any demographic, women and girls. And what this article offers is some red flags or signs just to keep aware of what's going on. Some of it is what Michael had mentioned in our conversation with him, but signs like showing extreme fear, victims appear lethargic or under the influence. One thing that I thought was interesting, and it's a no-brainer, but I didn't think about it until I saw the article, is that the victims usually are not in control of money or documents. It's the person leading this has all of the control. So I know these are, obvious red flags, but if you really stop and look around, I feel like, especially in business aviation, it can make a difference.
There probably just needs to be more tools. The other thing I'm thinking about that would be useful is some sort of corporate accountability or transparency. I think the more we talk about it, the more alert people will be and the more perceptive they will be to the environment. And so, if there was some form of report that was published every year or every quarter that showed off just metrics related to, I would say, airports where there were reported cases of human trafficking, or where things were done to combat human trafficking, would be like helpful, because we could then start being more targeted with our approach.
And I think one thing across the board through the articles that I've read in preparation for this interview, and as well as this NATA article, they say that the airport staff, or even flight attendants, they are the best people because they're there all the time and they're familiar with their surroundings. They interact with passengers. They are the best people to see these red flags and do something about it. So it's training, it's awareness, and it's just, like you said, ongoing reports and conversations is really going to make a difference at the end of the day.
So I have to ask you, Shasta, what role do you think technology plays in all of this? And I ask because there's a book that just came out called Your Face Belongs to Us by Kashmir Hill that highlights a company that's called Clearview AI. And what Clearview AI does is, this is a company that was launched in 2017. It's a facial recognition software that provides sort of like algorithm that matches faces to a database of more than 20 billion images from the internet, including social media applications. And so they basically crawl the web, and if your pictures are online or just in any database, they've been able to take it and index it. And now law enforcement has that data. And so in a sense, security cameras used to be passive, where it would just record data as you're passing by. And if there was an incident, someone would have to go back and go watch that footage until they recognize you. But now it's possible that with AI and this database, that it could actively, as you're walking into the frame, identify that that's Shasta and she's leaving this airport and she bought the ticket and this was the price and she's in this seat. What role do you think technology should play in this?
It is a blessing because you can identify people, victims, just identify anyone traveling and verify that information. But I think at this stage, it's a blessing that we have this technology. It's here. I feel like we need to embrace it and find ways to utilize it to better humanity. But also it's really scary to know that all this information's out there and people can identify you. But I just think that, I don't know how much it's going to move the needle because, again, I don't know very much, but I would assume that everyone's under the radar.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, the question is already answered. It's not like it's a question of whether or not this stuff will exist in society. It's already here. The question is whether or not we're ready to accept it and to embrace it. I shop at an Amazon Fresh store, and it's, you scan your card, you go in, you pick up your stuff, you scan your card, you go out, and then maybe 10 minutes later, you get the bill in the mail to say you picked up 4 items. So they've already, I use that for grocery shopping, and it's like a hassle-free way for me to shop. I don't have to go into the checkout line. I can go in and grab a few things and I'll be out in 10 seconds. In fact, it will tell me that I was in for just like 20 seconds or so forth. So in a sense, we are already in like this phase of society, and as you're saying, we just need to embrace it. And to be honest, if you have nothing to hide, it's a benefit. If you have something to hide, that's where things get tricky. But I could also see where companies in the name of commerce, start trying to figure out how to sell you stuff, because they have so much data on us now. They could start building more complete profiles of you that is just almost like you have no privacy anymore, or no space to yourself anymore. And that's where I think it could get tricky.
It's all who has this information. What are they doing with it? Are they using it for something positive, or are they using it to get something out of you?
Yeah. Well, it was a really fascinating conversation. I think we are just scratching the surface on this, and I'd love to, have Mike back on to talk about more what they're doing, what are the recent developments, since we've talked. I think there's just so much more to cover in terms of public awareness and legislation and victim support, and just, where is this initiative going? I think it was like so fascinating to hear him speak, and it was a great conversation.
It was, and I really appreciated his insights. I also thought it was very valuable to hear about the job potentials for the youth, because there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and Homeland Security is certainly always looking for talent. So I appreciated that as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for us today, Michael. Great conversation. Michael Camal, thank you again for joining us. And thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Uplink. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Before we move on, we've got just a couple of important housekeeping notes for all of our listeners out there. The first is join Uplink LinkUp community. Here's one benefit of joining. If you're looking to dive deeper into the world of aviation and join the conversation, we'd love for you to be a part of our Uplink LinkUp community. It's a great space where enthusiasts like you can discuss, debate, and share insights about everything aviation. Joining is super easy. Just head over to our website or check out the show notes for the link in our Uplink LinkUp WhatsApp group. We have a general group for aviation discussions, and we have a special Uplink LinkUp DC Metro group for our listeners in the DC area. Being part of Uplink LinkUp means you get to interact directly with us and other aviation enthusiasts. It's a fantastic way to get your questions answered, share your opinions, and even influence future podcast topics. So don't miss out on being part of the Uplink LinkUp community. Join today and take your love for aviation to new heights. We can't wait to interact with you all. Again, thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you next week.
See you next week. Have a good week, Shasta.
Thanks, Michael. Have a great week.